Our next guest says that he is bracing for the markets to overreact to President Trump's tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China, and would advise investors to buy the dip. Tom Lee is head of research at Fundstrat. He's also chief investment officer of Fundstrat Capital, as well as a CNBC contributor. And, Tom, there's not a huge dip here. We're talking about declines of 1.5% or less for the major averages at this point. Is that the dip you're talking about, or you think there's more overreaction potentially to come?
Overnight, it was actually, I think when futures opened, it was almost twice the decline. So the small caps were down 4, NASDAQ down over 3. It's good to see sort of markets are catching their breath. It's the second Monday shock, right? Last week was DeepSeek. Right. But I'd say actually it's almost a victory that if we open only down 1.5%, because I think there was quite a lot of panic over the weekend.
Yeah, look, the market to this point has kind of operated on the idea that this is a negotiation that's taking place, that these tariffs, if they are implemented, won't last for long. Is that your thought process as well still?
Yes, I'd say there's decent odds that, let's say we go 3 months out, that the tariffs will be rolled back because concessions were received. And there are also other mechanisms in place to sort of protect markets from the downside. I know people think this is an unlimited risk scenario for stocks, but if the tariffs come into play and other countries go into recession, those central banks will be easing, which will actually improve liquidity. So I'd say that as bad as things look, I do think there's downside protection.
What do you think our central bank will do in reaction to this? Because President Trump, a week and a half ago, or a week ago, weeks go by so quickly, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, said that he would like to see our central bank, along with other central banks, ease rates. Our central bank did not really seem to go along with that based on the numbers and the inflation data that they've seen.
Well, for the Fed, they'll have to tread carefully because in the short term, would be an inflationary impact. Mm-hmm. It may not change inflation expectations, but it's going to be realized inflation. So I do think it makes sense for the Fed to actually tread carefully. But if I was a central banker in a country that got hit with tariffs and they're getting pushed into recession, of course, they'd be easing.
You know, I think the market looks at this and thinks, well, President Trump likes a strong stock market. He likes to see those numbers on a daily basis. And maybe there's the sense that he will not get too stringent with things if he thinks that there's a big impact in the market. Do you think that too?
Yes. I mean, I think ultimately the goal of the President Trump is to make the U.S. stronger, both companies and the economy. There may be some short-term pain, and it's hard to tell how much of this is an investment in improving U.S. competitive positioning. I think it is kind of a test of resilience right now, and the fact that we're only down 1.5 percentage points mm-hmm. on pretty major universal tariffs is actually a sign of resilience.
Nvidia has been hit multiple times lately, from DeepSeek, which has managed to train its R1 generative AI model to operate at par with other established players like ChatGPT, to the recent Trump tariffs that hit the stock market with so much uncertainty. But after the dust has settled for now, is Nvidia stock still worth a buy after all these debacles? Welcome back to Investocracy.
From some of that decline.
Can I just ask you, it's both a sort of a combination market meets policy meets politics moment, which is, there's a sense in the market, I think, that this is some negotiation and something happens quickly. I don't know how quickly, though, we're talking about. And then the second order effect, not a second order, maybe first order effect is Americans like myself who love avocados. And right, when my avocado, I'm not joking. When the avocado costs, so much more than it did before, and not just avocados, but all this stuff that's going to happen in the supermarket. And I imagine
there are a lot of vegetables and fruits
in the next week, right? Like this is going to happen. And then the question is, what kind of political pressure there's going to actually be on President Trump when the American public starts saying, I'm at the supermarket and this is not working for me? Or do you think that the American public is going to say, I'm willing to accept this pain. I have my Super Bowl party. I'm at my Super Bowl party, but I can't have all this stuff. Is that going to be okay? Because I remember being on TikTok during the Biden administration when people would go on from the supermarket and, say that the world was coming to an end because, eggs cost what they cost. So what say you?
I do think Americans vote with their wallet. So if they're feeling the pain, just like when they feel pain at the pump, it does affect confidence. And I think if people are feeling in their wallet what they have to pay, and many Americans actually don't have an ability to absorb all these huge costs. So I think you're going to feel the pain.
Do you think the companies absorb the pain? Or do you think, that's the other thing about inflation, which is sort of an interesting thing. There's been these moments where some companies have absorbed the inflation. Some companies have actually done the exact opposite. They have exacerbated the situation because they said, well, look, if everything's going up, we should actually get ahead.
They have to raise their costs.
We got to get ahead of this thing now.
That's right. Greedflation was, I think, a bigger problem before. I think there is a lot more pushback, and it's going to be tougher for companies to pass on prices. But I'd also, take some of the executive order at face value. This isn't really about rewriting all of trade practices as much as it is trying to get Canada and Mexico to talk about the flow of illegal drugs and illicit chemicals, et cetera. So,
well, to be honest, he has to have that. He has to have a crisis at the border because otherwise it is Congress's place to raise tariffs. If it's an emergency situation, then he can declare an executive order. He says Europe is going to be next. What's the emergency that we say is the reason that we're raising tariffs on Europe?
Yeah, and maybe that's when the market will actually push back as well.
As stocks fluctuated, Nvidia found itself roughly 20% off its all-time high. The murmurs in the market suggest that DeepSeek's advancements have sent investors into a tailspin, underlining fears that cheaper and efficient AI models might reduce demand for Nvidia's high-performance GPUs. Historically, Nvidia chips have been the workhorse of intense AI computations, but with DeepSeek proving that there is a leaner way, some foresee a potential downturn in Nvidia's dominance. But before going on with the video, are you into cryptocurrency? If so, check out our second channel, Investocracy Crypto. We bring you breaking news, expert analysis, and the latest trends in the fast-moving world of digital assets. Whether you're a seasoned crypto investor or just curious about the future of finance, we've got something for you. Click the link in the description to subscribe to Investocracy Crypto now. Don't miss out and stay ahead of the game. Now, let's get back to the video.
That's a better way to put it.
We also, Scott, have Nvidia up today. This, to me, smells a little bit more like Nvidia is winning and AMD is struggling at the time when there's this gold rush to, big investment spend. And their shares were already down, 33% over the past year?
Well, and the problem for NVIDIA is it's nearly in bear market territory. So maybe up a little bit today.
I meant
thanks
AMD.
to AMD's weakness, but it's still down a bunch.
Right. AMD is down, I think, significantly over the past year, while NVIDIA is up even today. So if that was a read-through to the whole industry, you'd think, well, then they're selling off. Instead, Jeremy, it seems like they're sitting in the prime position here.
Yeah, I think the market's picking a winner. Right. And they're saying that NVIDIA, if 75 billion is accurate, again, because these are guidance and forecasts, and we've seen this movie before, right, is that Mark Zuckerberg during the metaverse area couldn't talk about enough how much CapEx they were going to spend. And then once it started to get hit into the stock, that number changed really fast. And so those numbers are just guidance numbers that, hey, what we could expect. Those numbers could get, if DeepSeek ends up being something where there's efficiencies to be made, those numbers of CapEx numbers are going to come down pretty fast. So I think from NVIDIA, AMD point of view, I think they're just picking a winner and saying AMD is not gaining share against NVIDIA. NVIDIA is maintaining a lead, and the companies that are buying those chips are still saying they're buying them.
The stock presently trades at 47 times trailing earnings, a reflection possibly seen as daunting. Yet Wall Street remains optimistic, projecting a revenue growth of 52% by fiscal year 2026. Meta's Mark Zuckerberg has praised DeepSeek's novel technique but confirmed it's not altering Meta's substantial $60 billion spending plans. This underpins a key insight. The demand for NVIDIA's GPUs is far from plummeting. But before going any further, if you made it this far into the video, thank you. These videos take a lot of effort and time to make, so if you enjoyed them, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. This goes a long way in helping us grow. That said, back to the video.
There's a lot of folks who've been saying that the Mag 7 was going to falter for the last year or so, and everyone now trying to jump on a bandwagon. Is DeepSeek the thing that's going to hurt these companies? Have you changed your modeling?
Well, remember, Charles, I've been talking about since the middle of the year of last year that I expected an AI digestion phase in 2025 by the time we get to the middle of it. And if you pull up a chart of NVIDIA, you can see that the stock's actually down from where it was in the middle of last year. And so DeepSeek, what it does is it cuts the cost to produce 1 unit of output from an AI model by like 80%. And I think that's part of the reason you're seeing companies like Microsoft or Google missing their revenue forecasts. Now, what everybody's latching onto today, which is why you're seeing whether it's Nvidia or the other AI-related names up, is that despite these companies missing, like Google today, they're taking up their CapEx forecast.
Right.
Well, that can only continue for so long. At a certain point, you're going to want to see revenues being generated. And right now, your viewers should ask themselves, how many of them are using AI on a PC or on a smartphone? If they're not, then you have an issue, because that's ultimately where all of this CapEx has to show up in terms of us adopting it. And it's much like after the internet, where you went through this digestion phase for 2.5 years, NASDAQ went down 78%, and it was an absolute crushing, even though the internet was continuing to grow. So for NVIDIA, the short version is CapEx digestion phase this year. I think by the end of the decade, the revenues will double again from where they are today on a quarterly basis. But it does not mean that you're not going to go through this period where costs are dropping a ton for pre-training and training, but none of us are really using, or the world's not using, killer AI applications. And until that comes out, inference spending is not going to take off to offset the drop.
In light of the evolving AI landscape instigated by DeepSeek, should investors hit the panic button on Nvidia? Absolutely not. Nvidia's innovative strides have always been central to its resilient growth, positioning it as a continuous frontrunner in tech. But what do you think? Feel free to share your thoughts. Finally, if you would like to know what companies like Nvidia have been up to these past few days, go ahead and click on the next video on your screen. See you there.